Hi, everybody. If you don't know me already, I'm Gail Adams, and I am the business owner and founder of Pack Holidays. I'd love to introduce you today to lovely Simon Hill, vet behaviourist, and we've chosen to get together through discussions and meeting up to give you something that might help you with your dogs. We often get people that come with multiple dogs, some with behavioural problems, and Simon is the absolute expert on this, so he's got some information and tips that might be able to help you. And we will provide at the end of this contact details for Simon so you can get in touch with him. And I'll hand you over to Simon now.
Hi everyone, I'm Simon Hill, vet and behaviourist, currently based in Lincolnshire. Gail's going to sort of ask me some questions that just kind of prompt me to tell you stuff about myself and how I work.
Wonderful. That's great, Simon. Well, I've got a personal question first because I've had a very reactive dog.
Okay.
Not now, unfortunately, but it's one of my passions to make people feel comfortable and confident, whether they're away from home, at home, out walking, and not always be worried about what the dog's going to do. So I had a very reactive border collie who would be perfectly fine off lead, but as soon as he spotted something coming from a great distance, the behaviour reactions bounded up and bounded up and bounded up until he was on his back two legs with his one front leg swinging in the air. And it's a highly embarrassing situation.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
What can we do about that? Is that the question? Or
I was just thinking something off the top.
Okay, yeah. So what? Certainly, that's a not uncommon problem. That's one thing to say. I think a lot of people struggle with that sort of problem behaviour, and as you said, it's also really potentially embarrassing to different degrees. I think a lot of behaviour problems are embarrassing for people because we feel we're judged by our dog's behaviour. There's a lot we can do about it, and you know, that's just one particular specific problem. But one of the things that I do in a behaviour consultation is find out the overall problem. So it kind of highlights in a way the difference between a behaviour approach and a training approach. And so in a behaviour consultation, we're going to find out a lot about how you live with that dog. And so, for instance, is your dog generally over aroused? So it's generally stressed and not sleeping an appropriate amount of time, and that's meaning that it's more likely to react. And you know, is there a variety of reinforcements in the home or outside? So for instance, is the dog regularly reacting to other dogs it sees pass in the house or in the car? What's its relationship like with the other dogs in the house? Is it might be able to live with other dogs in the house, but actually there may be some problems in the relationship that are quite subtle anyway. Does it have pain? And this is a big one, and so often I think people come to me and they say, oh no, he's fine, he does agility even, or whatever. And it's I think dogs are very good at just getting on with it and coping, and we don't see necessarily always the subtleties. So one of the things that happens in a consultation is we'll get video of the dog's gait and look at some subtleties of how that dog moves. And that is also assessed by a colleague. So there's another vet will look at that gait, and she's also a pain practitioner. So as part of the whole consultation, you're getting two vets potentially looking into that dog's movement to see whether pain could be a factor, and that's then an important part to this. I suppose the final area potentially to look at is medication, and so some dogs, their arousal levels, their anxiety levels are just too high, that with the best management in the world, we can't easily do the right things to change that dog's behavior, and it needs medication help to bring its anxiety arousal levels down, that allows then the process of counter conditioning to be used.
Right, so that's really interesting, because what you're doing with an overall consultation is looking at every aspect and looking at it holistically, right across the board, because reactivity often doesn't mean reactivity to one thing. It's usually generated by something, and then there's a behavioral conditioning in some ways. And once they've built that reactivity level up, it's hard for them to let it go, even if it's not pain.
So there's learning happening all of the time for all of us, really. You know, and that can be good and bad, and there's a kind of general principle that we look at here, that we want to avoid further reinforcement, because over time that becomes more established. And so some dogs, they might be at a point where they are generally ready to react to all sorts of things. Other dogs aren't, and they might be ready to react in just quite a specific context, and that can be, and that's all about learning, of course, as well. So some dogs, the learning is going to be really specific. I only react to Jack Russell Terriers, or I only react to small dogs, or I only react to medium-sized dogs and below, or I only react to dogs in my neighborhood, you know, rather than actually, if I go into a new environment, I'm okay because I haven't had all that reinforcement. So there's all sorts of factors here that are kind of, you know, affecting a dog's learning, and they are individual, and that's what we are looking at. And this then approach is different to a trainer who might call themselves a behaviourist, and they are using behavioural techniques. And what they would be doing is they come into that situation and they see the dog reacting, and they give you ideas on what you might do to change that behaviour in the moment. But that is different to this behavioral history taking that has happened. So in a consultation with me, it's 2 hours. The first hour is the history taking. You know, at what point did your dog learn to be reactive? And that can vary. And so if it happens at 5 years of age and you've had it since a puppy, then that makes one much more suspicious that this is medical factors rather than learning. If it's a case of it's always been an anxious dog, it always reacted to some dogs, and gradually that's become more generalized to all dogs, where that, you know, may be more fitting with pure learning. But if we don't do the history taking, then we can't work out the difference in your dog's case versus another dog. All we are seeing is that dog just reacting to another dog.
And this is, I think, very importantly, why you differ. Because you're absolutely right. I've seen instances of people who go to dog training because there is a specific issue that's bothering the owner. The dog, for example, that one I gave you, you know, that's quite common, isn't it? Seeing something from a distance and reacting and panicking as it gets nearer. But because of us being human beings, we want to fix that problem. And actually, the problem is not just that experience, it's what potentially could have happened. Create it. And that's what your key criteria. Holistically looking from start to now.
And it's not that training and trainers can't help at all, because they really can. And if there isn't you know, pain involved or other factors involved, then that will potentially work in lots of cases. But I think it's for people to have an understanding of the difference between those two approaches, and it becomes increasingly confusing because the term behaviourist doesn't tell you necessarily that, ignoring the fact that it's generally difficult to kind of, trust people. It's difficult to know the qualifications of people and what they mean. They've got lots of letters after their name. Well, what does that actually mean? So I mean, so hopefully the fact that I'm a vet is helpful as a starting point, because as a vet, we've got, there's been some negative press about vets, over the last few years, but I still think there's a lot of trust for people around vets, that there are, add years of training. They are attached to the Royal College, and so if there are any problems, one can complain about them. But as the recent documentary said from some vets talking in that program, most vets are not in it for the money. Most vets are in it because they love animals and they want to do the right thing. And I am one of those people, and I'm lucky to be doing a job where I'm able to spend a lot of time getting to know individual pets and their owners, and spend a lot of time asking them lots of questions. And that's one of the differences between what I do and being a vet in practice, is that history taking part is, quite long and involved. And so, you may have taken your dog to the vets, but your vets only have 10-15 minutes to find out, and so when it comes to medical things, sometimes I can get to the bottom of medical factors that are important in behaviour cases because I've got that extra time.
So the extra knowledge that you have from a medical perspective and a physiological perspective, plus everything else that you've done in terms of behavioural, does come straight back to this holistic approach of looking not just at a significant individual problem, it's the whole history. So tell me about your success rates. Can you give me an example of something that's gone really well?
So I mean, just the first one that comes to mind straight away is Reggie. So a dog that had become anxious about going into the house, and he'd become anxious, it turned out, about going into the house because he'd become anxious about the noise of mobile phones. And so the most important part of that consultation was one, working out that this problem had developed, in sort of middle age really, and two, that this dog still had pain, and so he was on some medication from his vets for pain, but it wasn't enough. He still had a quite abnormal gait. He had pain when I manipulated his elbows, and so we added in pain medication, and his anxiety about coming back to the house resolved without really doing much else. Now, it's not normally that acute, as in pain is a factor, it's not the whole factor, and so we're doing various other things, to make a difference. But that's one example.
That's a really good example, and not something that an owner like me would have recognized. I would certainly not have thought about an uneven gait or walking ability and a mobile phone in the house triggering that kind of behavior. That's a really, really good example. I'm sure there's quite a few people that have similar circumstances where something's triggering an issue that's already historic.
and don't even know it, and the subtlety is massive, really. And I think we are going to, as time goes on, be more and more surprised by things, and things like gut pain. I mean, I've just been in a veterinary behaviourist group today, and we've been talking a little bit about gut pain, how subtle the signs of that are, and I'm just looking into it actually with my own dog, but the subtlety of that might be really surprising. Diagnosing that, we can't even go on things like gait. We're so there are all sorts of things there to investigate further as our knowledge grows, really.
That's fantastic, Simon. So what would you, if you have, we're going to pop this out there to our wonderful crowd and let them have a look and listen to your great advice and your really great successes. How, if somebody, does have some issues that they'd like to have a chat about, how do they get in touch with you, Simon?
So at the moment, my website is kind of the main point of call, and there's lots of information on there. So that is www.simonvetpower.com. If you did a Google search and just put in Simon Vet Power, you would find me, no problem. There's a contact page on there as well, so you can just complete that. If it's an emergency, I advise people to send me a text as well, so that speeds up the process. So my mobile number is on the website as well. If you want to kind of just look at things more generally, Simon Vet Power is Facebook, and there's lots of posts on there that might have free kind of useful information. Starts to give you an idea of my approach, in different cases as well. There's lots of posts on there. You can contact me via Facebook as well. I do get back to people quite quickly, but emailing via the contact page is actually best. So.
The best one. Okay, yeah. And I know that we all have to live somewhere. So we are kind of stuck in our geographical context. Are you able to offer support to people virtually? Or okay.
Yeah, so I do online consultations for sure. At the moment I'm based in Lincolnshire, so it's a nice place to come for a holiday. If you fancied, I can perhaps find places near me for you to stay. But yeah, an online consultation is definitely for sure an option. I also do, which suits some people, 30-minute phone calls, which kind of gives some general advice and idea on approach, and that's £35. So still
good value.
I hope so. Yeah. So yeah, either way, use the contact page to get in touch with me, and I should get back to you within a day normally.
So there's lots of ways that people can get help with their dogs. It doesn't have to be face-to-face. You can do online, you can do phone calls, which makes you very accessible to people as well. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Simon, for agreeing to meet up and have a chat this morning. I really appreciate it. I'm sure all the Pack Holidays followers will appreciate it too. And in the post, you'll see Simon's details. I've got a link to Simon's website, so you can contact him directly. But again, any problems, give me a shout. And I hope you've enjoyed this session with Simon Hill.